Hello everybody and welcome to episode 2 of the now named Mike and Matt's X-Cellent Adventures. This is an X-Men movies retrospective podcast, review, series, thing, amalgamation project. My name is Matt Waters, one half of the Mike and Matt, and I am joined, as ever, hopefully, otherwise what are we doing here? It's just me in a room by myself, by the excellent Mike Thomas. Mike, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing really well. I'm very excited because we're about to discuss the best X-Men movie ever.
Possibly the best superhero movie ever. We'll see. We'll get into that. Before we do, since we came up with this idea, it's obviously gotten more legs under it. We now have an official YouTube page, SoundCloud. We are on iTunes. We are on Stitcher. We're in all these good places. It's soundcloud.com/Mike and Matt. There are links to everything else on the side there, or just search Mike and Matt's X-Cellent Adventures. Subscribe, follow, share, support, all of that would be greatly appreciated. And so we did X-Men, so this time around.
Well, just on that note, I can't wait till we start Instagram. We can live Instagram us doing the podcast. It'll be very exciting. People will be really into it, I know.
Let's get a Kickstarter going. If you want to see us record this live, our handsome faces, that is absolutely something you can pay us money to do. I mean,
yeah, we'll just fly you over here, or we'll fly me over there.
Oh yeah,
and
okay,
that's what the Kickstarter will be for.
That's what they call a stretch goal, Mike and Matt do this live. Right, so we covered the hell out of X-Men 1. It is time for X2, X-Men United, X-Men 2, whatever you want to call it, because I can't find a coherent, consistent name.
That name is so dumb.
Yep.
What was it? I did watch the commentary. Even Bryan Singer's he kind of it sounded like that was a concession on his part. It sounded like he didn't like that name at all. But what can you do? That's the story of Bryan Singer, the first 3 X-Men movies.
Bryan Singer.
Child rapist. So, as we talked about in the first episode, when X-Men came out, comic book films were just not much of a thing at all. And if you actually go back and look, in 2000, there's basically nothing that came out besides X-Men. And then in 2001, literally not a single comic book film came out that I could find. So it's still, that just proves, there wasn't even anything really on the horizon when X-Men came out. At least not immediately so. 2002 changed that a little bit with Spider-Man. Spider-Man was obviously a big deal, and by all objective means a bigger deal than X-Men. Would you agree? In terms of culturally.
Oh yeah, pop culturally, Spider-Man's way up there. It's Superman, Batman, Spider-Man in terms of the big pop culture superheroes. So
that being a wildly successful film financially and a not awful film creatively, that was a pretty big deal, and it's no longer just X-Men show, they're sharing the stage. Cut to 2003. X2 is one of 3 major comic book properties made into a movie. We also have Daredevil and the Ang Lee Hulk, both of which are pretty notoriously terrible, but nonetheless kind of show where this is all going, where we're just going to be given shit, having to watch comic book movies 5 of them every year. And so it's a little bit of a different climate, but X2 is still, X-Men is the biggest one at this point just because they're the first to get the sequel out. But I don't know, it's crazy to go back and look at this and just see how it was in such beginning stages and how it was still so poorly done. That Daredevil and the Ang Lee Hulk are both just slogs to get through. You saw both of them, I assume, right?
Oh yeah, I've seen basically everything there is to see when it comes to comic book movies, but it just shows it was not a safe bet by any means. I think X-Men did terrifically well. If you look at the first for every franchise, X-Men's got it. The only other possible argument is Spider-Man, but as we already discussed, I think X-Men is better than Spider-Man 1. But everything else, its first foray into the film world is generally pretty bad to okay.
Yeah.
And as you said, this is the first one to get a sequel, and it also got a bit of a budget increase, somewhere between $110 and $125 million, up from $75 million. So more money to play with this time, and you can tell.
But despite that, though, Fox, you can definitely see the increase in budget on screen. But the thing that we didn't really get into much with the first episode, and we probably should have, is that like Fox was not really on board with X-Men. It was almost like they were making them begrudgingly. And they didn't want to commit a huge amount of money to the first movie, because if it failed, then they just wasted a bunch of money on a tentpole franchise that's only going to have one film. And like, it seems like they didn't even really entirely get out of the habit of that with the second one. Because if you listen to the commentary, like over and over again, singers talking about, well, we didn't have the money, so we had to do this. We didn't have the money, so we had to do this. And it's just like that no expense spared attitude that a lot of studios have with big budget movies did not really pop up with X-Men until Days of Future Past, which is the first time Fox was just like, whatever it takes to get this done well, we're going to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, $110 million is nothing to turn your nose up, but I would have thought the success of the first one would have gotten them a little bit more money than that, because it was 125 and then they cut it by 15, I think, during production, and he had to cut out the danger room and all sorts of stuff. But
and by the way, these financial decisions in some ways probably helped the movie. I mean, I do strongly believe, art comes from adversity in a lot of ways, and not having unlimited resources is probably a good thing and forces you to get more creative, but it's still nonetheless interesting to see, basically what's one of the themes of this podcast is that X-Men does not get the respect in a lot of corners, including from the people who are financing it. Like, it's not treated as a big deal.
Not at this stage, but it will get there, as we will see in later episodes. But yeah, I mean, that is the landscape they were dealing with at the time. This is their sequel, and something we probably should have done in the first one is actually summarize the plot. So I've taken the liberty of doing that this time. So, so X-Men 2 is loosely based on the graphic novel God Loves, Man Kills, which is a iconic X-Men comic book arc. You should go check that out if you haven't. So the film begins with Nightcrawler making an attempt on the president's life, and this
the greatest scene in X-Men film history,
quite possibly. And this gives military veteran William Stryker and General Bad Guy the go-ahead to raid the Xavier Institute, and he does this while Xavier and Cyclops are visiting Magneto in his plastic prison, where we left him at the end of the last film. Xavier and Cyclops are both captured, and during the raid they get a handful of kids, but thanks to the recently returned Wolverine, most of them escape. Meanwhile, Mystique breaks Magneto out of prison in a comical and also, I think, quite good scene. And Jean Grey and Storm track down Nightcrawler, realise he was brainwashed by some drug by Stryker, and he used that to get Magneto to talk about the school in the first place. These three groups of mutants converge, and they basically plot an attack on Stryker's headquarters at Alkali Lake, which is, very importantly, inside a dam. And inside his headquarters, he's using his mutant son, plot twist, Jason, who has illusion casting abilities, to trick Xavier into using a makeshift Cerebro to kill every mutant on the planet. During the attack, Mystique, on Magneto's orders, disguises herself as Stryker and tells Jason to change the target from mutants to humans, which is something we're going to have to talk about in a minute. But the X-Men save the day. Magneto and Mystique get away, and they recruit Pyro, who is a new member of the cast. We'll get to that again in a minute. But during this skirmish, the dam was damaged and is taking in water and is collapsing. So everyone's running outside desperately to get on the jet and escape, but it seems they're all going to die because of the damage to the jet and the huge flood of water coming their way. Until Jean Grey, who has demonstrated more power throughout the film, she steps off the jet and she manages to hold the water back, lift the jet into the air and get them away, and then lets herself seemingly die. And sometime later they visit the president, they say, hey, let's all work together, blah, 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 blah. And as the credits roll, we see a phoenix-like shape flying under the water. I guess swimming would be the more accurate term. But yes, that is the basic premise of X-Men 2.
Yeah, I mean, the story... The story's pretty good overall. It feels like a natural extension of what happened in the first one. Like, it feels like... Everything feels like escalated, but like escalated appropriately. It's like not just bigger for bigger sake. Like,
yeah,
pretty much every action a major character makes sense and feels earned and not forced.
Yeah, it's not as tight of a film, but it's not. It's also not bloated in a way that I don't care how good a lot of these films are these days. There has not been many films over the last few years that haven't been at least half an hour too long, in my opinion. And this one is a good length. I think it is longer than X-Men 1. It isn't quite as tight, but it is still a very, very good film, and I think a step up. So, with the cast, we have returning...
Basically, everyone returns except for Toad and Sabretooth, right?
Yeah, pretty much. There you go. That's the quicker way of saying that. So, as is tradition in a sequel, we need more characters, and we get that in the form of... Well, significantly, we have, on the side of the good guys, we have Nightcrawler, played by Alan Cumming. He beat out Neil Patrick Harris for this role because he could speak German fluently. Nightcrawler can teleport. He's a devout Catholic, former circus performer, and he's a lot of fun, as we will see throughout the film.
Yeah, we also somewhat in the middle between good and bad guy, fittingly enough, is a recast Pyro, who was he's in the first one, but you can't even really count him as a character. He was recast by Aaron Stanford, who does a really, really nice job in the movie. Basically, being a young mutant who did not come from a wholesome background in any way, shape, or form, and thus is prone to being a bit of a dick. And we get to see, honestly, he has a nice little... He has probably one, in terms of the supporting characters, probably has the most complete and satisfying mini arc. Like, when he takes off with Magneto at the end, it's like, it doesn't feel like, well, Pyro has to do it. It's more, that's what I felt like John Allardyce would do at that moment, or however you pronounce his
name. Yeah, I like what it's not, he doesn't try and do too much with his character. It's understated, and it's a nice... It's not like a betrayal or a plot twist. It's demonstrating again that while we are following the X-Men and Professor X, they are not necessarily the only way of going about things in this world. And Magneto isn't necessarily a terrorist. He's just offering another path, and Pyro chooses that path. He's not lured. He's not brainwashed. He's not tricked. He just identifies more with Magneto's way of thinking, and I think they have some really nice little scenes.
And Stanford does a nice job of
making the most of what he's doing, unlike, say, his two running mates in the movie, Sean Ashmore and Paquin, who aren't given much to do and don't do much with it, despite getting plenty of screen time, quite frankly.
Yeah, they kind of have two real scenes, and one of them is shared with Wolverine and everyone. It's the raid on the school. They kind of do a little something. The big scene for those two is the scene where Iceman, quote-unquote, comes out to his parents and tells them he's a mutant, and that's about the most they ever really give Iceman to do in terms of acting. He'll be in the next film a lot more, doing some action scenes, but this is their only real attempt to give him some character stuff, and I don't know, I like the idea of it, but he's not the strongest actor in the world.
No. I did like the idea, though, of, like, even in this quote-unquote, minority group, there's still, like, different levels of privilege. Like, Iceman having a strong family unit at home makes him a little bit more of a well-rounded, nicer human being compared to Pyro, who's just, we don't know he was an orphan or anything, but it's pretty clear based on a couple shots and some editing that, he did not have this wholesome background growing up, and, he behaves accordingly.
Yeah.
So it's just good little details like that is, like...
Yeah, these are...
That basically Bryan Singer brought for the first two X-Men and then largely disappeared for a while.
Yes.
In the franchise.
Yeah, this is one of the things that always appeal to people about the X-Men is it's an ensemble cast, and it's people from all over the world, it's people from different backgrounds who all just happen to be mutants. It's not that here's 5 virtually identical people with powers. And you see that here with Iceman. In a very, very, very minor role that's not really even worth discussing, we do get the debut of Colossus here with no accent.
Do you want to know the story behind that casting? They literally found him in a gym. Literally, like it's like that cliche, like trite Hollywood story of like, you never know, you're just gonna be working out one day in a gym, and some casting agent's gonna find you and cast you. That's what happened. Wow. And it's just weird how they took like some shortcuts with certain roles, and that was just one of them.
Yeah.
I don't really understand And like this guy ends up playing Colossus for 2 more movies, and was offered it in Deadpool, so he could have been playing it in 3 movies.
Yeah, I really don't get it. Like, Colossus is a fun character to have in the films because his powers are fun. But why they stuck with this kid that they just cast, just as you said, just from a gym? Why they didn't recast him when they decided to expand his role, I don't know. But he is there.
Well, and what's it? I guess Kelly Hu's playing Lady Deathstrike, but she's not really much of a character. She does get her moment at the end, but she's not really much of a character.
1 line of dialogue.
Yeah, and that's not like even that doesn't even like her character moment. I mean, like she's a zombie essentially in the movie. So she couldn't really do much with that. But she did convey like the physicality of the role nicely. She had good on-screen chemistry with Wolverine in that fight scene, but she wasn't really a character.
Yeah, they basically said they altered her origins a bit. She is in the X-Men cartoon and the comics and stuff. They basically made her a female Wolverine. She's a silent assassin basically, and she has a huge fight scene with Wolverine. And
it's pretty fun.
Yeah,
we forgot to talk about Brian Cox, who is pretty damn excellent as Colonel William Stryker.
Yeah, it's. I mean, in the first film, you have. I mean, he's kind of taking on the role that
Bruce Davison.
Thank you. Yes. Whereas he was approaching that from these people are a national security risk, so we need to do. We need to have heightened awareness. William Stryker genuinely hates mutants on a personal level because, as we find out, his son having his ability to cast illusions caused his wife to kill herself. So he considers mutants to be scum, to be vermin. He's genuinely looking for genocide. His plan was to kill every mutant on the planet. So it's a massive step up in the terms of stakes. Like Magneto's plan, if it had worked, ultimately, it's not an ideal outcome. But
worst case scenario, it kills 200 people.
Exactly. But he wasn't.
That wasn't even his goal.
Exactly. What Stryker is trying to do here is on a completely different level. Yes. And they change him from a television evangelist to a military veteran, probably looking to not offend religious
military
people.
Scientist.
Yes, a military scientist. Sorry. But just I think the scenes, particularly the raid on the mansion, it's really cool seeing it as like an organized military attack on these mutants who are used to dealing with sort of ragtag freaks and sort of inept cops maybe, and then it's just like, here's this strike team who have come here to put you down. And I know Wolverine sort of, cuts right through them all, but still, I did like that as the new threat here. It's more sinister.
And like I said, like the stakes like feel appropriately raised. Like this is because as much as William Stryker does not go through an arc in any way in this film, you do feel like he's a fully realized human being who clearly got to this point for reasons, not good reasons, but like for reasons. And like using the Liberty Island incident, and that like clearly would heighten tensions between mutant and human and non-mutants. And he uses that to his advantage and to carry out his goals. And like I said, that's just part of just an organic elevation of escalation of stakes. So that's just good filmmaking.
Yes,
good storytelling.
And secondary to Stryker's, his plan in this film is he is quite intrinsic to the past, and we will see him pop back up in later films, recast. Obviously, they couldn't talk Brian Cox into lowering himself to appear in worse films, but William Stryker is heavily suggested. Well, I think he does come out with it and say he gave Wolverine his adamantium skeleton. And Wolverine, that's the key thing. When he took off at the end of the last film, he was off looking into his past. And he actually does make it to Alkali Lake. He just doesn't realize where the facility is.
This world-class hunter with unreal smell and sight and hearing can't figure out that the base is underneath the ground.
Yes. So that's a big part of Wolverine, and that's a big theme with his character in this movie. He was dragged into the conflict last time just through happenstance, really. He then took off looking to find out about his past, and he's still very motivated about finding that out. He wants Xavier to look further into his mind. When he comes face to face with Stryker, he is so desperate to learn about his past, he kind of abandons the immediate danger around him. Who knows what he was going to do? He may have given himself in, I don't know, but he's haunted by this past, and Stryker is a key to it, and we will see that come back up in later films.
Yeah, and that aspect of the Wolverine character in this movie, I think is done perfectly and played really well by Hugh Jackman, where it's just like, I mean, you really feel like if this was you, and you have no idea who you were, every single time Logan basically acts a little selfishly, like, you totally buy into it, because you can't even truly imagine what it would be like to have your life wiped away, and he's constantly being forced to pick finding that out or being a slightly better human being.
Yeah, and you see it throughout the film, like,
yeah, it's like, and they go back to it time and time again.
Yes, like during the raid, he's willing to, like, he's trying to get everyone out, and he just goes, "Oh, forget it, leave me. I want to do this." But then by the end of the film, when Stryker has been captured, has been chained up, Wolverine has one of the kids literally in his arms, and he is offered, "If you let me go, I'll tell you, what happened to you." And because his character over the course of this film has adjusted to the role of not just an outsider who happened to be in this conflict, but he's a protector of these children. He's taking on an active role with them, with the school, not just the X-Men team. And he says, "I'll take my chances with him," meaning the kid, and he walks away from a chance to learn about his past. So you do see that character growth, and in a film with a lot of characters and a lot of pieces in play, I know he is the dominant one, he is the main character, but they do a good job of giving him that growth.
It's what we like to call in the film industry a protagonist.
Yes. Arc. Well, yeah, I mean, that's something. I mean, I don't know when you want to get into that, but Wolverine certainly, it made sense for him to be the main character in the first one as the outsider to sort of bring us into the conflict, but he is very much now permanently becoming the lead of the whole franchise from this film. It's very clear that's...
But at this point, they're still doing it well, though.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. Like, as we've said, this is both of our favourite X-Men movie. I think it's excellent. I think there are very few, if any, faults with it. The only criticisms I have
we have a couple.
Okay, sure. The big criticisms I have are more kind of to do with the overall direction the franchise will go from here. If you take this film in a bubble, I think it's excellent, but stuff like shifting Wolverine to be, the chosen anointed hero who is above everyone else is not something I like as a general direction for the series, and it kind of starts here.
Yes, but I don't blame that film for that at this moment.
Okay.
If they'd concluded his story well, would you care? The problem is, like, pretty much every step they take with him from this point is bad for the next, 3 movies.
Sure. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, from this point onward, he is...
But that's not this film's fault.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's not a criticism of this film. It's just I see the seeds being in this film.
Yes. And similarly, I had a hard time... so I actually watched this twice in the past week since we recorded the first podcast. And the first time I was watching it, I was so distracted because I was just like, I'm enjoying this, but it's like it just reminded me of what's to come in The Last Stand, and I can't even properly enjoy this as a result. Like, I'm just like, oh god, they were so close. They were so close to having this awesome trilogy, and
you think to what could have been.
Yeah, you just can't help but think that. And knowing how badly it gets, it's honestly the franchise. They had a franchise killer. Their third film was a franchise killer in terms of credibility, just the narrative of X-Men films in general.
Yeah, they've been scrambling to get back. To this,
and they've been held they're just constant. It's like when you have 2 children, and one of them's the well-behaved one and does everything right, but then when they finally make a mistake, they're judged far more harshly for it than the kid who's always a constant screw-up. And just no matter how many times the movies get back on track, the moment they slip up, they're just completely dismissed. Like, the overreaction to Apocalypse is, like, perfectly encapsulates that to me. Just, like, I understand, like, Apocalypse is a flawed movie, and I understand that. But just the outright dismissal of it when, like, Thor is getting good reviews just, like, blows my mind.
Yeah, people go in on the X-Men movies when
it's like when they fuck up, they, like, everyone just must go.
Yep. Well, I think it's part of this. There is the ongoing narrative of everyone loves Marvel, they can't do anything wrong, and everything else sucks, which is not true. But
no,
I guess we will see that.
That'll be the next podcast series we do.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Oh, so I think we got to talk about the major issue with this movie.
Okay.
And that is a lot of the arc of certain characters is predicated on this idea that any feelings Jean Grey and Logan have for each other are legitimate. And there is nothing in the first film that suggests that to be possible, as we discussed at length. And nothing happens in the first 45 minutes that makes you think that there's an actual relationship here. And there was only, and it doesn't, because we know so little about Jean and Scott besides they're, like, you know, good, grounded people who are probably in love with each other. It doesn't make sense when Jean actually acts like she's tempted by Logan in any way, because Logan's done nothing but be a creepy asshole dick to her.
Yep.
And it's just a really, like, super condescending story. And so this is actually illustrated in the audio commentary by Bryan Singer. Is one, what's clear is that, like, a lot of decisions that were made on the script, like, were made throughout filming. Not like they were trying to finish it as they were filming, but, like, they just made changes and, like, adjustments. And one of them was after Magneto saves them in the Blackbird, and they're trying to fix the ship, Jean and Logan were originally not supposed to kiss. And Bryan Singer was just like, well, we really need them to, like, they don't really have a relationship, so we need them to have a relationship for that choice, quote-unquote choice at the end to have any weight. And I'm just like, yeah, you're right. They don't have a relationship, and it doesn't make any sense in the world that Jean's kissing him right now.
Nope. And the choice is entirely in Wolverine's head. Like,
yeah.
It was never a choice. That's the entire point of this.
Yeah, and it only works if you, like, keep that credibility of saying, like, Logan's being an asshole dick, and this is all in his head.
Yep.
And
yeah, that whole scene, there would have been a way you could have done that to save it. Like, the kiss could have been infinitely shorter. Like, she could have immediately pulled away after, like, a second, and it still probably might have worked for the way they wanted it to. But they make this seem clearly like she's like, oh, I love you, but I can't cheat on him right now.
Yeah, and that's like, don't make me do this. Like, what?
Yeah.
First of all, you're a telepath. Just stop him if you actually wanted to. But that's the problem, is that we, like, have a sense of what she is as a character, but of who she is as a character, but not enough to make this in any way believable. And then, like, and this notion that Jean chooses Scott over Logan is just like, what?
Well,
and, like,
there is this quite, I mean, I picked up on this. I don't know if it was intentional, but we'll give them credit and say it was. So after this scene, I mean, she always says, I love him, etc., about Scott. After this scene where her and Logan kiss, and she fights a brainwashed Cyclops, and after the fight, he comes over to her and he says, I love you, and she doesn't say it back. I don't know if that is on purpose, but I noticed it as part of this ongoing thing.
Actually, you know what that might have been, though? Is that, so there was this whole side plot that they dropped. Not side plot, but it was probably too strong a word, but in that battle, after Jean gets accidentally blinded by Scott in that battle, so they make no mention of it, and it's not referenced at all, but there's a scene later, like when Wolverine saves them all from the dam, or whatever, like the flood. Jean is the only one not looking at him, and that's the only remnant of that story that they dropped at the very end, where she was blind and didn't know where he was, so she was the only one not looking at Logan when he's talking to everyone.
Okay, so it's probably more that they just cut away from that earlier than...
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, she was probably, like, distracted by being blinded and wasn't focused on saying I love you.
Yes.
So
also,
I give them no credit.
On the jet, when they realise, she's dead, the way And James Marsden acts that so well when he's devastated by her death. But the way they present this to you, Cyclops is just wailing, but Wolverine is centered in the shot, and he is sort of cast as this, he's the heroic one that's lost something. Cyclops is upset too, but how sad is this for Logan? And it's like, that is not...
It's bullshit.
Yeah.
That's bullshit. And then that scene at the end where they're in the school, and he's like, Scott, she did make a choice. She chose you. If I'm Scott, I'm like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. That's going to make it worse.
This was not a thing.
Wait, what?
We've known you literally for 72 hours. You were in our life for about 48 hours, about 6 months ago, and now you're in our life again for an hour 24. That's it.
And you're macking on my girlfriend, and now you're saying she chose me? What happened?
We've spoken 6 times in our lives.
I think it is a clear choice. I would like to think, because David Hayter, who wrote the first two, or made a large contribution to the writing of the first two, obviously none of these are ever written by just one person, but he believed that James Marsden deserved more screen time. So I don't think it's a narrative choice, but I think the studio basically sees the dollar signs on Wolverine and positioned him to the front and center, because it's not just this. They outright mock Cyclops at times, and most notably, when they steal his car, they turn the music on and it is NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye. And I don't know if that is meant to have just been the radio, or they're saying that they're trying to say that Cyclops is a girly man that listens to boy bands. But yeah, I have a strong attachment to the Cyclops character. I think James Marsden plays him excellently, and we will talk about this a lot more next time. But yeah, I do not approve.
I think where you and I disagree on this, and we've talked about it a lot in the past, is that you think he's screwed over in this film, and I think he's set up for greatness in the next film. Only that film did not happen.
I suppose my knowledge of how it actually turned out clouds that for me. I can't take my mind back to a moment where I'd seen X-Men 2 and hadn't seen X-Men 3, unfortunately. But
that's totally valid. I mean, it happened to me while I watched it. But I mean, and we've already talked about too, James Marsden's just emoting in the end when we can't see his freaking eyes, and he's nailing it out of the park.
Yep, just absolutely devastating.
It's one of the best. It's one of the best acted scenes in the entire franchise. Is him in the ship at the end.
Yep,
everything he does there.
He doesn't believe him, trying to fight through it, all of that.
And not only does he not have we can't see his eyes, but we haven't seen him basically for the last hour of the movie. And he just steps on and just gives that scene so much more dramatic weight because of his loss. And it's like this weird comment on the movie. Not that Hugh Jackman does a bad job in that scene or anything like that, but just Marsden captures so much of what the actual human stakes are of that moment, and yet it's like you said, that the shots focus on Logan. Cyclops is secondary in that moment, and that's a mistake.
Yes.
And so anyway, so when I say to me, I think this is a major issue with the film.
Yeah.
I think this undermines the film's status to me as great. I have a hard time calling it great because of this, because I think this is a pretty major issue, considering how much it's centered around the main character and the way it treats two major supporting characters. So I have a hard time calling it great, but because I think just because of this.
Well, especially because the clear and obvious groundwork they're laying is for Jean to return as the Phoenix. So it's not just that she's dead and in Wolverine's head, we had something, but she probably likes Cyclops more. It's not about that. It's we know she's coming back, and you have started telling the story that she loves Wolverine, and it's problematic to say the least.
Yeah. So,
but let's talk about what is great about it. I mean, there are so many excellent scenes in this film.
Pretty much almost everything else.
Yeah.
Almost everything else is good.
Right off the bat, the first scene in the film, Nightcrawler infiltrating the White House and trying to stab the president. Why don't you talk about that? Because that is you have very, very strong feelings about this scene.
Because Brian, the first X-Men was criticized a lot then and still now for not having a ton of action, And Bryan Singer is not an action director. I mean, he's just not. But this scene was so creative and and despite its complete ridiculousness of, this blue demon monkey, teleporting wherever he wants and throwing and just decimating a Secret Service team in 2 minutes is just so grounded and believable somehow in the way they film it. I love the ridiculousness of Quicksilver and Days of Future Past and Apocalypse, but it doesn't hold a candle to this as far as I'm concerned. This is the one of the most creative and exhilarating and tense action scenes you can see.
Yeah, and I mean, he ostensibly has a non-aggressive power in teleporting, and you see the way that's something I enjoy about superhero films generally, the creative use of powers and just his fighting style, combining his sort of circus background, his sort of weird, his tail he can hang from, and he's got, he's got more animalistic features. Combining that with the teleporting, it creates this combat style that is just so interesting. And at the time, there wasn't really a lot like this out there. I mean, you see teleportation-based characters are more in vogue now, but when this was one of the big scenes everyone was talking about, I remember that much, that people were like, oh man, Nightcrawler in the office.
Yeah, and it really just set, it was just a great job of introducing us to a character, delivering some intrigue, because remember, at the time, where Nightcrawler trying to assassinate the president goes against everything we know about Nightcrawler as a character. So it's very both intriguing for people who know him and people who don't know. It's just a great scene, and it sets the wheels in motion, and it all ties back in later on, and just fantastic storytelling. Great way to start off the film.
Yep, for sure. So I would say the next big scene would be the raid on the school, unless there's anything between then and now that you think particularly stands out. That whole building attention sequence where, they're at the school and Xavier is meeting with Magneto for the first time in the film. Yes.
Actually, they're only seen together, at least where they're both conscious.
Yeah.
And it's that slow burn to get there with the tension. And then when it finally starts to boil over and Magneto just screams, "You should have killed me when you had the chance," it just blows me away every single time. It's such an intense moment.
So well acted. And oh God, what have you done? And you should have killed me.
And it also chance. Just capture once again, brings us back to the central conflict between those two, which is that Charles is only willing to go so far to meet his goals. Yes. And there are lines he will not cross, even if it's for the quote unquote greater good.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
All this can be easily stopped by Charles Xavier actually exerting his power.
Oh, yes. I mean, we're jumping ahead a little bit here, but as we said last time, we don't think Magneto is really a killer. He genuinely doesn't believe his machine kills. His body count thus far is 0 to his knowledge. I mean, you can argue he killed the senator, but is he even dead? We don't know. In this film, he, right up until the end, has a body count still of 0, because I'm taking those grenades that he pulls all the pins on to be stun grenades. And then he goes ahead and changes the machine so that he wants Jason to kill all the humans on the planet. And I've read in my research that the script originally didn't call for that.
Yeah.
And Bryan Singer thought that it was keeping him with Magneto's ruthless character. I challenge you, Bryan Singer, and say you have misunderstood Magneto's character, because if you take that bit out, it's still...
I think, I was listening to commentary, and Singer basically explained was that he didn't like the notion that they ended truly united. He didn't think that was fitting with Magneto. He think that was too divergent from the actual, who those two characters were, that they, at this point in their lives, they could never end on the same side, except for in Days of Future Past, but regardless. And I do buy that, and I do kind of believe, I think what the thing with Magneto is, and with a lot of these characters, as we've talked about, is that they are so powerful, but they do, rein it in, even Magneto, to a degree, because Magneto could probably take over the world if he wanted to, but that's just not, what he's interested in, per se. But if you really push them to their limit, they will, it's not in Wolverine's nature to kill a bunch of cops, for instance, or not cops, but like military henchmen. But he does that because he's pushed, he's a caged animal. Like, yes. he's pushed into a corner. I think wiping out all the mutants is the equivalent for Magneto. I think that's pushing him into a corner.
Sure.
And I think, he's like, you want to come after me? Well, I'm going to come right back after you. And I think even part of that is that in the end, Magneto's main goal of this whole operation is just to save himself. I mean, is to like save in the sense that like he's going to, and by that like save the mutants because he does not want the mutants to be wiped out. But I think it's more just like in the back of his mind, if he can pull this off, he's going to try to. But he's not. It's not like this is his master plan per se. This is how I interpret it. It's more just like, if I have the opportunity to do this, I'm going to try to do it.
Sure.
And at the same time, because that's not really his master plan, he doesn't really go about ensuring that it happens. Because like he knows there's a bunch of X-Men in
that's true.
the facility. He knows odds are, like, by this point, he has to know that odds are like they probably won't let this happen. And I'm not like, it's one of those things where it's like he'll put it in motion if it happens, great, but he doesn't really care.
Yeah, I mean,
that actually might be more fucked up than wanting to do it in the first place. But
yeah, you could take it as it was all just an enormous warning shot, like don't.
And even if he like would be, he was perfectly fine with it happening, but it's more just like he wasn't going to construct a plot to wipe out the humans. But if you're going to construct a plot to wipe out the mutants, and I have the opportunity to reverse that, guess what? Fuck you.
True.
You're all going down.
True.
You all let this happen.
That's a good way of explaining that one. I will give you that. I will back down on that criticism. Okay, so the raid on the school. I like this scene. I like it's sort of echoed later when the police raid Bobby Drake's house. It starts off very quiet. You've got Wolverine bonding with Iceman. Like, Iceman chills his bottle of soda for him. It's all very fun. And then suddenly there's army men in the school, and they are tranking children, and we are presented with, they give no fucks. They're coming for every one of them. They will trank all these kids. They will take them all in the night. And Wolverine goes in on all of them, and you get this surprisingly brutal scene where he stabs one of them through the chest and pins him up against the fridge while screaming at the top of his lungs, and then lets him go. And I know they cut back that scene a little bit to get through censorship, but I think for a franchise that, while it isn't afraid to be more adult or anything, it's one of the more violent things we've seen him do. But I think it's great. I think it's a really good character moment that he is, as you said, he doesn't want to go out and pick a fight, but if you test him, he is an animal in many ways, and he just lets go in that moment.
And also in terms of, I think a fitting and fair comparison of him and Cyclops is that, Cyclops could use his optic rays or whatever they're called to cut a hole in a human being, but he always holds back.
Mm-hmm.
And Wolverine rescues a bunch of kids and saves the day for all intents and purposes because he's willing to cut a hole through people. And Cyclops was not willing to do that to Lady Deathstroke.
Yes, that's very true. That is one
and
of the big...
like seeing those happen at the same time, it's once again, it's seeing those competing ideologies at work. Is, Cyclops, for everything he is, he's Charles Xavier's man through and through, and he's not going to just kill. He will do anything in his power to not kill somebody, including not letting himself get captured, but just not doing everything possible to prevent it.
Yeah, exactly. And whereas Wolverine is he wasn't raised by Xavier; he was brought into this.
Don't put baby in a corner, man.
Exactly. Don't put the Wolverine in a corner. And yeah, we get this big escape with Iceman creating a huge wall of ice to, in his mind, save Wolverine from the army dudes, but he was about to potentially learn from Stryker what his origin was. And I just think that's a really beautifully shot scene where you've got them on other sides of this block of ice, and like they touch hands and stuff. And then Wolverine does snap out of it about his whole, he's in this trance when Stryker is presented to him. He gets these flashbacks, and then he snaps back out of it, and they go on the run. Do you want to talk about Magneto escaping from prison? Because I hear differing opinions on the way this is done.
Really?
I think it's great. So Mystique,
I think it's super clever.
Mystique breaks into this facility, learns the names of all the prison guards, also gives every geek in the land so much fun by freeze framing the computer and seeing all the names of all the different mutants. But she finds one of the guards in a bar, hits on him, drugs him, and injects him with iron, I guess. Yeah. Yes. And then when this guard brings Magneto his dinner the next day, Magneto senses the too much iron in your blood and pulls it out, rips it out of him, maybe killing him. I don't know.
As a kid, I like to think that he didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see how he's not dead.
But he continues talking to him, and I know that he's a dramatic person with all this grandeur, but
Magneto talks to a lot of people who can't hear him.
That's true. Okay, so maybe
I think that's a pretty
Magneto
common
kills
idea in the first two movies, is that he's not afraid to speak when he knows no one can hear him.
Yeah. So he harnesses all this iron, turns it into 3 little balls. They smash all the glass. He turns one into a disc. He rides it out with his arms crossed, and he escapes. I think it's a great scene.
I've never heard anyone criticizing it before.
I've heard people say it's ludicrous that the idea of injecting iron into him is like, hey, we are dealing with blue people who can change appearance and teleport here. Like
I said, there's, once again, much like the first one, there's a bunch of technology in here that we just have to accept works, and I don't think it's all that big of a deal.
Yeah.
One thing I did learn again from the commentary was that security guard, the actor who played him, decided to put on 40 to 50 pounds for this role. I'm just like, dude, why? And the sad part is, it absolutely contributes to the character, but I'm just like, dude, why would you do that for 2 minutes of screen time?
Yeah. Oh, and of course, when Mystique is hitting on this dude in the bar, that's Rebecca Romijn. She gets to not wear the makeup for a quick scene. And hey, she's better than Jennifer Lawrence. Let's just say that.
It's partially mostly just a running joke at this point that she's better than Jennifer Lawrence, but as Mystique, she exudes so much more charisma.
Mystique is my favorite character in this film.
And there's so much you want to know more about her, and you just want to know more about her.
I mean, her name is Mystique, so that's a pretty good thing to have pulled off if she has this mystery. We will get more into her in a minute, but so Magneto escapes. The next big one, we should probably talk about this. Iceman's coming out to his parents. So Ian McKellen, the rumours have it, helped them rewrite this scene because it has quite clearly got the subtext of him coming out as gay, but with the metaphor of mutants. Do you want to talk some about this?
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about with the first one, it's kind of just bullshit to appropriate the story of oppression, give it to a straight character, but it's an easy metaphor for kids. The heart of the movie's in the right place. The director's also bisexual. Alan Cumming and Ian McKellen have both promoted the movie. They're both openly gay, so just okay, but it's you just make the X-Men a little bit less straight and a little bit less white, all that jazz, and everything would be a little bit better. Just a little bit, not a lot better. The world would not be would it be a better place, but it would just be a little bit less icky for me.
I do like Bobby Drake's mother's line of "Have you tried not being a mutant?" It's just really good.
But that's the thing is they do the metaphor well.
Yes.
And they commit to it, and the metaphor it works for a reason. It's a dumbed down version of a very real issue of oppression, but with adult eyes, it's hard to stomach it a little bit.
I like what they were going for, but
like I said, it's one of those things where it's your heart is truly in the right place with this one, but I don't know.
And it is interesting to see. Normally, we only see these characters' parents if they have some sort of origin where it's them first discovering their powers. This is a rare instance of seeing the character's parents when the character has already been introduced to us.
And it gives the 3 youngins in this case something to do, and it makes them a little bit more well-rounded. It makes them a little bit more interesting. But with two stronger actors in the Rogue and Iceman roles, we probably have something a little bit more meaty, maybe would be the word for it.
Yes.
Because as Rogue is getting less broken and more confident as a human being, Anna Paquin is
superfluous.
Anna Paquin's ability to portray that effectively diminishes.
Yeah, she has shrunk from this film dramatically. Like, when you don't give her much to do with that character, well, when you take away what that character was, she doesn't really have a lot left.
And obviously, I think it's great that character does become less broken. That's far more interesting in a lot of ways. But Anna Paquin was just not the person to convey that effectively.
No.
Interestingly, entertainingly.
I don't know if this would even count as another scene, but it transitions directly into... obviously, Iceman's little brother doesn't like that his older brother is a mutant, and he calls the police on them. And one of my favourite shots in the movie, Wolverine is out back, he's making a phone call. As he's going back in, his back is to the camera, he stops for a moment, we don't know why, and then we see why when he heads back in and closes the door. You see the reflection of the police.
That's a great shot. Yeah. That's a really great shot.
Surrounding the house, and then this big fight. Wolverine gets shot in the head and seemingly dies. No one is like, well, he's going to get back up.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think it effectively conveys how cops would behave in that situation. Probably more so if he was black, then we would really believe it. But I mean, they believe he's holding knives and they shoot him in the head. That seems a little. It seems a little much. There's no other. And I thought something that could have been interesting with Bobby Drake's brother is that in the final scenes when Xavier's trying to kill all the mutants, we see him being affected too. I think that could have been, or even more powerfully, when we see Xavier trying to kill all the humans, we see the brother recovering while the two parents are now slowly dying.
Oh man.
My mind goes to dark places. So. Look
out for the final episode of this podcast is just going to be us doing our own fan fiction.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot happens here. We get a scene with the X-Men's jet almost being shot down, and then Magneto stops the plane from crashing. That scene's kind of just there for me. I don't know.
The big scene is, a big thing from that is that we start to see the Phoenix in Jean's eyes, literally, and as she's able to destroy one missile but not the second one. So we see basically her power steadily growing more and more throughout the film until it reaches a fever pitch at the end. And I think, I don't know, I think just Magneto happening to be there. I know, Magneto and Mystique were going to the mansion. They were going to the mansion. It's not inconceivable. It just feels a little too cute.
Mm.
It feels ooh, wouldn't this be funny if the ship stops and it's Magneto?
They just needed a reason to get the two groups together, and that's the scene they wrote.
It feels a little forced in some ways. It feels like you're elevating to the stakes of everyone but Wolverine is about to die in this moment. 30 minutes, 45 minutes of the movie, and we all know it's not going to happen.
Yeah. So they are camping out for the night for unknown reasons when Magneto could just fix that jet for them pretty much immediately. And we get some good stuff. I mean, we talked about the Wolverine Jean stuff, but we get some good stuff with Mystique.
Yes.
Nightcrawler asks her if she can look like anyone, why does she choose to walk around like this? Or why doesn't she hide? And we
shouldn't have to.
Because we shouldn't have to.
Such a great line, such a great delivery.
Yeah.
And I think in this case, we talked about before how they teased a Wolverine Sabretooth relationship, but they teased it a little too much for it to be nothing. I kind of like how they teased. I felt this was a good homage to the fact that Mystique is Nightcrawler's mother in the comic books, but there's nothing about this suggests that. It's more just hey, here, we see you.
Exactly. It's a little wink and a nod to the people that know.
It's more of a wink of a nod instead of an effective wink and a nod, I should say.
Yes.
And then, we see Mystique deciding she wants to bone Hugh Jackman, and I can't deny that the thought has crossed my mind as well, but it seems rather out of place given the...
I think she just wants to I don't know if she wants to fuck him or she wants to fuck with him, because she certainly does that, where she takes on the appearance of Storm, Jean, Rogue, and even Stryker to and asks him, "What do you want?"
And it just feels like, to me, it's just like, so there's so much, like, with this character, Mystique, like, she does feel like there's a character there somewhere, buried deep, and you want to know more, but when you don't know anything more, and she just randomly just, like, it's just, like, using sex as a weapon or something, like, it's kind of a little cringy, but I don't know. I think with, just like you said, like, the take-home message of Mystique in this movie is that she seems like an awesome character, and we need to learn more about her.
Yeah, and she just, because she's allied with them at this moment, but she still, she likes playing games with people. Like, she's creative in how she does things. She has all these one-liners. She's just such a cool character. And she will do more of that, because she will then break into Alkali Lake in probably my favorite.
Oh, that scene! It's again one of the better action scenes in the X-Men franchise. Is her just cutting through the military, and once again, a completely ridiculous but believable way.
Yeah, I just really like her, like, hyper acrobatic fighting style. Yeah. You see it a bit against Wolverine in the first film, but she's just so flexible.
They take it to a new level here. Yeah. Like, I mean, that's basically the theme of this episode. Should be like, it's the first movie, but better in basically every way.
Yes, and I have just been waiting with bated breath for them to use Mystique as effectively as she's used in this film. And she's not even one of the main characters, and yet there she is, like, stealing the show constantly. Great stuff.
Like, once again, like, a good testament to Singer's ability to give something to everyone except for Storm.
Yeah, pretty much. Who does actually save the day, kind of, by making it quite cold.
By the way, have we mentioned Storm once yet?
No. Okay, so Halle Berry drops the African accent. She is not any better.
Has since won an Oscar, by the way.
Yes, this is what I read, that because she won an Oscar, they gave her more scenes. But it's like, why? She's still not good.
And
this is time that could have been given to James Marsden or to Mystique or so many people.
Yeah, it's just, she has a couple of good scenes with Nightcrawler, but you feel like anyone could have played that, or you think that someone, like, I mean, I'll say this. I'll give the character this. It is a consistent thing in these first two movies that Storm is a little bit more militant in her beliefs that the world is a bad place, and sometimes that forces you to, like, do bad things. Probably a little bit, like, that's probably a little different than the rest of the X-Men. In some ways, but they don't really do much with that.
Yeah, they don't do enough to explain why that is, and if they did, you would get it, because she's had a very different life than them. Like, she was treated as a goddess in Africa. Like, I mean,
but we don't have the time to tell a story of a non-white person in this movie about oppressing minorities.
No,
we just don't have the time.
We don't have the time, but we can make her save the day by making it quite cold.
Yes.
And I don't want to get into this.
She does make it very cold.
Yeah.
Very cold.
I don't want to be the geek that I am, but she shouldn't have been able to do that, because she can't make weather indoors.
Yeah. Is
my understanding of how her powers work. But hey, she does.
They kind of play fast and loose with those sort of details now, so, you know.
Yeah. The script originally called for Magneto to save Xavier, but they thought that Storm needed more to do, so Nightcrawler teleports her in, because they've been talking throughout the film. She's been trying to make him more confident, it would seem, and or
just like a little bit more, like, forceful, like a little bit more like, do good things when it's time to do good things, like, don't hang in the shadows.
Yes. He teleports her into a room he can't see inside of.
I'll say, like, the silver lining of that is that it gives also Nightcrawler more to do, and it gives Nightcrawler. I mean, like, Nightcrawler doesn't have, like, an arc, arguably, without Storm in some ways. So, I think that's a worthy choice to make, while at the same time having, in my opinion, the justifiable decision to have Magneto attempt to commit complete and utter genocide.
Sure. And then we get these two fight scenes happening kind of at once. Wolverine against Deathstrike and Cyclops against Jean. The Cyclops-Jean fight isn't really much of a fight, because, I mean, he tries to blast her, she holds his power back, and then
it accidentally causes the destruction of the dam.
Yes. snaps
Jean
him
Grey's
out of it.
blinded, as we discussed, but not really in the final cut.
Yeah.
The far more interesting fight is the Wolverine versus Deathstrike, which they just, once again, is a great slow burn in terms of building tension, where it's like, okay, you think Deathstrike is... All right, the stakes are raised, but Deathstrike has the adamantium skeleton too. And then you think, uh-oh, what's going to happen? And then he cuts her, and then she heals. Oh my god, she has those healing powers too. And then when that moment happens, there's like a pause in sound for a split second, and then there's like this really dramatic like Terminator music as she like climbs on top of him and escapes. It's like one of my favorite beats in the entire movie. Like, it's just a great example of using she kind action to tell a story instead of telling a story by making action happen.
Yeah, she kind of almost sells it for a second that, oh no, I'm dead, and she's like, no, I'm not. Watch this. Yeah. It's really good stuff. And like forcing him to think, okay, how would I kill myself? Like,
and then, obviously Wolverine wins by stabbing her with adamantium. But and even, like I said, in typical Bryan Singer fashion, he manages to give this character a moment too. It's at the very end, you can see that very conveniently at the end of her life, the
mind control wears off.
The magic mind control serum wears off, and you can see in her face she becoming like a real human being for a second, and then like that look of just like regret on Wolverine's face when he realizes, this person was really just me. I just wasn't being controlled. I just wasn't having mind control.
Yeah, and then she sinks to the bottom full of, and she almost looks like this doll, like she's disturbingly peaceful. Well,
it was a real mannequin.
It was a mannequin, yeah, I know.
Yeah,
it just. I guess we could maybe talk about this. Throughout all this, Xavier has been tricked so Stryker's son can project images into people's brain, and I think this is a really effective way of doing this. It's not that they mind control Xavier. They explain that away by just saying, oh, you're too powerful. But rather than just directly manipulating him or directly controlling him, they emotionally manipulate him, and they key in on whose character is, because he projects to him a lost little girl who needs to find her parents, and because Xavier is Xavier, he wants to help this child, and he goes to use Cerebro. I thought that was a really effective way of doing that.
Very clever, effective, clever, and also continues the theme that will be basically present throughout almost every X-Men movie with Xavier, is that you need to remove Xavier from the plot somehow, or remove his power somehow because he's too powerful.
Yeah,
there's only so much he's willing to not do, to where the point it would be like cruel of him to not use his powers, so they have to find a way to remove his powers.
Yeah, it's there are certain superheroes who have power sets that mean they have to be... It's like, how has Superman accidentally run into kryptonite this week? There we go. And now he's out and he saves the day. I mean, that is the character. And then, I guess Jean's sacrifice would be the next major thing to happen. But we kind of touched on that already. I don't know if you want to go back into it. But.
I think the biggest issue there is, do you buy into the fact that that character in that moment felt that the easiest way to save all those people was sacrificing herself?
I mean, she lifts the jet with her mind.
It's like, so why can't she lift herself?
Yeah, exactly. Or why couldn't she have done it from inside the jet?
Yeah. And I think, honestly, this is... I mean, like, Singer's pretty open about, like, this is what he wanted to do, and I don't know if he constructed a situation where it felt truly earned. Like, it was touching and sweet, and honestly, really, James Marsden acting pretty much sells the situation more than anything else, but it just seemed like there was too many other options for... It felt a little bit forced.
Yeah. There's... It's one of those that as soon as you deconstruct it, it doesn't really make sense, but it's just...
Or just think about it for more than 5 seconds.
Exactly, yeah.
You don't have to put in much thought to be like, there's like... It seemed like a million other scenarios here where she does not die.
Yeah.
That would be just as effective.
But it allows her to die, and it allows her to do that shot that I remember seeing in all the trailers where she's got one hand blocking the water and one hand raising the jet, and then...
And like I said, it's powerful, and like another small beat that I love is so she controls Xavier's mind for a bit to talk to them, which is one is interesting of itself. But the moment she relinquishes, like the look of pain and regret on Xavier's face as he realizes what's about to happen, is just like is gut-wrenching. It's like watching your dad be sad, and it's awful. And like I said, like Marston's doing a killer job, and like also just like there's a couple shots where they like cut to the kids' reaction to all this, and they're so overwhelmed by the emotion they don't know how to respond.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, just like a small touch there that I noticed this time, and really nice. Like despite the fact that death felt forced, the reaction to death in a lot of ways felt appropriate by everyone.
Yeah,
it felt like a moment.
Yeah, you know that it's a somber thing. It is, someone cherished has died. The whole school is sad about this. Like, she was liked by the kids. She was liked by everyone. And that's kind of the movie. So you had the commentary. I did not. You had the deleted scenes. I had to look some stuff up. Is there anything from either of those that we haven't touched on that you want to get into at all? Or?
I feel like all the commentary notes came up throughout the discussion. Just in general, I think what's interesting is like seeing Bryan Singer talk about making the movies then and then talk about making the movies now. Like it's kind of like this rosy-eyed, well, we didn't have the money, yada yada yada. But like in between those two times when he wasn't making movies for them, he painted a little bit more of like, the narrative was more, this is pretty bleak, like of experience at times in terms of dealing with the studio and all that. So that's just kind of interesting to me. Just like generally, like when he's being paid to make X-Men movies, he like looks at it a little bit more positively, basically, than when he's not being paid. The lead scenes are pretty useless.
You see Jean flying the jet with her mind for a moment, and stuff like that.
There's really there's stuff that seems so meaningless. It's hard to believe they cut in the first place, because who wouldn't even think to cut them? But like you're also not missing anything. So
yeah,
I guess they're the perfect things to cut. But no, I think like the most interesting things that were cut before they filmed, basically. Like they, the Toad Nightcrawler fight never happened. Although once they actually did film a scene with a Gambit character that did not make the DVD.
Yeah, there's this ongoing theme with Gambit that we will continue to touch. He almost debuted about 3 times before he actually did. We do see Beast on a TV screen in his human form, and it's not
Kelsey Grammer, so that's yet another timeline issue that X-Men was not able to fix.
Yes. And he was going to grow fur towards the end, like when Xavier was affecting all the mutants, he was going to grow fur,
which would actually be somewhat oddly consistent with the franchise, that he was somehow able to suppress it, but the moment like you kind of remove his consciousness and like focus, he can't suppress it anymore. I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a quirk in the films that wasn't true anywhere else, but whatever.
All right, so that is X-Men 2. Let's talk about where this leaves us.
Yeah. So like at this point, it feels like there's infinite amount of possibilities of great things to come.
Yeah, I mean,
and like they can do it in a number of different ways. They can conclude the trilogy. They can do a third film that not only concludes this story, but that maybe sets up other stories to tell. It leaves Scott in this not a wonderful place as a human being, but a wonderful place as a character with so many things to do. It frees up Magneto again to cause more problems. It frees up Mystique again to cause more problems. It leaves the world in an interesting place where it's like we basically we're all wiped off the planet. And who do we lead the blame at? The people capable of doing it or the people who did it? Wolverine has gone through, a very organic transformation over the course of 2 movies to being a good human being, like more of a selfish human being.
And we've had the teasers about his past, but we still,
we still know. It's actually kind of hard to believe. We don't know anything about it at this point based on the movies. If you haven't read any books, novels, or seen the cartoon show, you really have no idea what's going on with him still.
It's like deliberately teasing. There's
and you feel like
and it's horrific, and you want to see more. Yeah.
And they could have done a thing where it's like he thinks he's over the hump, and something pushes him back down the rabbit hole. Like someone comes from his past or something like that.
Yeah. You got Rogue growing in confidence. You got Pyro having joined Magneto.
Iceman's an X-Men now. He's got the uniform and everything.
Yes.
Rogue too.
Nightcrawler's on the team.
Yeah, and it just feels like everything's looking up X-Men at this point. and they've got a director who's got a clear and consistent vision, a clear and consistent voice throughout the movies.
They've got a mostly excellent cast.
And even like with the weaker members, they are kind of relegated to the side appropriately and not given much to do. And then everything goes to shit.
So there's a nice teaser for next time.
But everything just goes to fucking shit. And it's awful. And I'm watching The Last Stand tonight, and I'm not looking forward to it at all. I think it might be traumatic for me. Because The Last Stand ruined the franchise, as we've talked about. Like, it's never fully recovered. It never will fully recover.
Nope.
Until the only chance they have is they actually genuinely have to like let go of these movies and just start over.
Yep.
And actually, we'll save this actual discussion for Days of Future Past, but all this week I've been thinking about X-Men a lot, obviously. So we filmed the first one on Monday, and today's Friday. And I'm just like, did they make a mistake because, First Class did not have to involve the original trilogy in any way. You could have very easily said just like, this is a brand new version of X-Men, and Hugh Jackman just happens to be Wolverine in both of them. But like Days of Future Past was the conscious decision to like combine them and say this is all part of the same world. And now I'm at the point where I was like, maybe that was not the right decision.
Yeah, they could have just left it behind.
And personally, like obviously, I was someone who was so invested in the first two. I love that they didn't just toss them aside, but now seeing where they are now and seeing how much of an uphill battle they clearly still have when you have a thoroughly like average to decent film in Apocalypse just get royally dismissed, that just tells you how much of an uphill battle they have.
Yep.
And seeing another thoroughly average to decent film like Deadpool celebrated because it flies in the face of so much of what Bryan Singer has created, and I don't mean that as an insult, but more just objectively that's a fact. And seeing how much that was celebrated tells me maybe they should have just left it all behind.
Yeah. This is the thing. This film has such a legacy for me. This is what they will always be chasing. This is the one. For me, this is the best superhero film. I think this is the blueprint every film should be following. X-Men 1 and 2. Like, as a pair. This is how you do a sequel. This is how you do an origin film. And
like, this is how you do an origin film without feeling like an origin film.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Everyone's sick of origin films. And they did one by basically not having a lot of it be an origin.
Yeah, and
it's an origin film for Rogue and kind of Wolverine. That's it, the first one.
And, I think, as we've learned, is that the successful comic book franchises, in the end, they have a single and consistent voice, like, dictating everything. Now, in a case of X-Men and the Dark Knight trilogy, that was like it truly felt like an artist's voice coming through. With Marvel, it feels a little bit less artistry, a little bit more
commercially
driven. And I say that like I think that's true. That obviously though there's plenty of Marvel films that I like, but then you see something like when you lose that author's voice or auteur, if we want to be super obnoxious about it, sound much more clever than we actually are.
Yes.
When you lose that, it can go to shit really quickly, which is what happens to the X-Men franchise for the basically 8 years after this. Because I mean, like when you step into that theater watching First Class, you think X-Men's dead by that point. Yeah. You think there's no coming back for it, and like in any way, not even like minor victories. And that all happened because they didn't make Bryan Singer want to be there anymore. And he may be a child rapist, but he's a good filmmaker. And,
he is.
They didn't like not love him because he was a child rapist, so it wasn't like some moral stand.
Yeah, they didn't know then. Maybe I don't know.
No. I'm sure they all do.
Yeah, I'm like,
but
yeah. I mean, I think I have a higher opinion of the Marvel movies than you do because I'm such a nerd. But for me, this is still head and shoulders above everything. If I'm picking favourite films, this is the first one I think of. I can maybe make an argument for myself between sort of 2 or 3 of them, but this to me is as good as it gets.
So with that in mind, we're going to play a little game for test Matt's theory that X2 is the best comic book movie of all time.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna name a film, and you're gonna tell me why X2 is better.
Okay.
I'm gonna start off with some choices that I don't think.
Am I telling you why X2 is better or why that film is worse? Because that's a different.
Whatever feels most appropriate.
Okay.
Given the films at hand.
Okay.
Now I'm gonna start off with some films that I personally do not think are worthy of discussion of best comic book movie ever. In fact, some of them I think are quite awful. But to make this contest a little bit more legitimate, I'll pick some films that people hold in high regard.
Sure.
The first Superman movie.
It's
terrible.
It's not very
terrible.
good.
The second Superman movie.
Better than the first one. Still full of holes and weirdness. It's campy. It's all
Yeah, they're terrible. That's okay. Speaking of the 1989 Batman.
Well, that speaks for itself. I don't feel I need to make a comment on that one.
It is awful. Let's see. Spider-Man 2.
Ooh, okay, so this is the one that people point at and say, this is one of the best superhero films, this has, a legitimately awesome villain, this has that, this has, I am a massive fan of Spider-Man. He is my favourite comic book character. I do not accept any of the Spider-Man films. I think it could be so much more than it has been. So Spider-Man 2 is one of the only ones I can think of that would be a contender, but it just falls short. It just is something about it. I don't know. I really hate Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. Of the Spider-Man films, that's the best one.
It's remarkable that the films with Tobey Maguire are celebrated as much as they are, because he's not very good at it at all.
He's awful. I hate him. I actively hate him as Spider-Man.
Yeah, I don't.
It's just such a whiny bitch. It's Spider-Man, man.
Matthew.
Yes. It's good. It's not as good as X-Men. It doesn't have as many good character progressions. Not every single scene of it is compelling. It doesn't build in the same way. It just is not as good.
Yeah. I'm just gonna keep it chronological order. Shark Boy and Lava Girl. Batman Begins.
Okay, Batman Begins. It's very long.
It is not very long.
It feels long. That's a very well-made film. That's not a good. Okay, here's my hot take on Nolan. Those are very well-made films. They are bad interpretations of Batman. He punches his way through everything and yells. He never learns. He never uses his brain. He's meant to be the world's greatest detective. He does one instance of detective work, and it's using a magic machine to reconstruct a bullet.
Yeah. It's a bit fascisty. It's definitely a word. It reminds me a lot. My reaction to that is similar to my reaction to the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movie, which is that if you read the Lord of the Rings books, it's all about walking and reading poetry and singing and dancing, and that's not what the movies are at all.
Yeah, they just still get to
obviously.
battle scenes. Those. I mean, they're really well shot.
So
Acted,
I'd rather see
but
a unique interpretation of a work, and that's done really, really well, than a slavishly labored shot-for-shot remake of what you think of, for instance, Watchmen. It's just so obsessed with Watchmen that that doesn't make a good movie.
Yeah, it's like a panel for panel recreation in places, but not to its. It's I'd much rather see someone else's interpretation done really, really well. I find that interesting, especially considering all these movies are going to be remade over and over and over again. So I'd rather just see it done well and different. Actually, I'm totally okay with them being different. Yeah, I just think in a film series about Batman is always the least interesting thing in them, and I think that's a flaw. Especially Dark Knight Rises, which is awful. I don't get people that like Dark Knight Rises. I like Batman Begins a lot. I love The Dark Knight. I think Dark Knight Rises is terrible.
I can't argue against that, but maybe that'll be the third podcast series we do.
Yeah.
Let's see here. All right, 2006 looking pretty bleak. 2007 looking
I just
pretty
know
bleak.
I'm pissing people off with some of these opinions, and I love it.
Yeah, that's all right. 2008 Iron Man.
We went into this already. First half awesome, second half bad.
And that first half is super racist too. So
that too.
So how good is it really? Dark Knight.
I don't consider it a superhero film. That's why I don't put it into the discussion. But
we're talking about comic book films.
Okay, fine. As a film,
I mean, like, if you want to put like Scott Pilgrim versus the World here, like, that's fine too. I mean, that's a trashy movie, but like anything based on a comic book.
Okay,
property,
fine.
comic book property.
As a comic book, as a film based on a comic book, the only, like, that's way up there. Then, I think that's an excellent film. That's one of my favorite films. Just there's probably a little bit too much going on in comparison to X-Men 2. It's difficult for me to...
I don't know about that. I think like the biggest flaw in that is that they force the Harvey Dent fall.
That's what I'm saying. There's too much.
But compared to forcing their super creepy, awful Jean Logan relationship, I don't think that's nearly as bad of a sin as that.
I mean, yeah, but I still think there are maybe a couple of too many pieces in play in The Dark Knight. You're asking me to criticize one of my favorite films. I'm not a fan of this game anymore.
Let's see, 2009, pretty bleak. 2009 was actually a pretty empty year for comic book movies. Interesting. 2010, Iron Man 2. Oh, I assume everyone loves this because it's a better version of Iron Man, right? Oh, no? Oh,
I think you rated it higher on your top 10 Marvel movies, didn't you?
I did.
You're the only person I've ever heard express this opinion.
Because it's objectively better in every way, and everyone's criticism, and it's not even that good, but
it's not
everyone's
good.
Everyone's criticism of it is dumb. 2011, First Class. I mean, I guess we can say this for the future. Just a simple yes or no. Yeah. You don't consider it on the level?
No.
Okay.
No.
2012, Avengers. It's a pretty good movie.
It's a very good movie.
It's a pretty good movie.
It's it's... I think of the Avengers more highly than a lot of people do. I think when Avengers came out, everyone was all up on the Avengers, and I think there's.
But also remember, no one had. I certainly had no faith that the movie was going to be good because 4 of the first 5 movies sucked.
In Europe,
like there was Thor, the Ed Norton Hulk.
Oh, which is the one you think is good?
You
said 4. Really? I think Cap is the best one. But hey.
I like Captain America retrospectively more because that's my favorite corner of the Marvel Universe, so I now in turn find it more interesting, but I don't think there's anything inherently all that good about it, besides Haley Atwell.
Okay. I think there's this weird thing where people are now looking back on Avengers and sort of knocking it down a peg or two, when at the time it was just overwhelmingly positive as far as I remember.
Yeah.
I still think it's a really good film. I think it does a phenomenally good job of balancing characters and giving everyone something to do, except Hawkeye. But hey,
he gets the Cyclops treatment.
Kind of, yeah. But he's no Cyclops.
And honestly, what I noticed at this time is that they both get cured of their zombie syndrome by getting hit in the head really hard, which is, at least that's consistent, even if they're not made by the same studio.
There you go.
You just gotta get hit in the head really hard.
I guess just it isn't. I think the first half of the Avengers is awesome. I think some of the stuff on the helicarrier is very hit and miss, and then the final battle again is quite hit and miss. Like, there's awesome moments in the Avengers, but there's also some stuff where it's like you could have just lost this.
I really, really like the Avengers.
So do I.
I think there's an argument to be made, though. It's almost more. It's kind of like my reaction to Days of Future Past, where it's more like the accomplishment is more impressive than the actual movie.
That they pulled that off is phenomenal, and it's that DC have been trying to chase that and take the shortcut to the end. Like they want the Avengers money without putting in the five films worth of work. It's
despite all those movies being bad.
It's staggering they made this work and turned Marvel.
That's why I think it was such an impressive accomplishment, not just from a business perspective, but just like making a good movie. Like
I think people
Marvel did
look back.
Marvel
on
did not
Avengers.
have a. I think if once you get some perspective on it, it's going to seem so much more impressive because Marvel's gotten pretty good at churning out very watchable movies, but like those early movies were pretty bleak. All right, this is I know some people think this is great, so I'll just say it. Man of Steel.
You think some people think that's great?
Moriarty gave it an A+.
I think it's one of the worst films I've ever seen. Forget superhero films, forget comic book films. It is atrocious.
Yeah, Zack Snyder is a pretty terrible film.
Yeah, it's awful. there are a few good scenes, and like none of them are to do with Superman. It's the stuff with Jonathan Kent, and it's the stuff where he's like a drifter with a beard. The rest of that film is garbage.
Okay.
There is a podcast with me, Kevin, and Justin, Kevin Ford and Justin Houston, just tearing that film apart. So go search for that if you want. But
lovely.
Yeah.
You can link to that in the description.
I will. I think I will.
There you go. The Winter Soldier.
That's normally when people are talking about their favorite Marvel movies, this is right up there for a lot of people. I think
number one.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I feel you're setting me up to fail here. You're asking me to tell you why. Okay.
Hey, you made a bold claim. There's been a lot of movies that have come out since 2003.
It's true. I think the length of X-Men 2 will work in its favor against anything modern, because everything is too long. Even the films I like are too long, and this is probably one of them. I'll probably look it up, and it won't actually be overwhelmingly long. But I just think
I bet you it's shorter than X2.
Do you? Okay,
I'm looking it up right now.
Okay, you would look it up right now, and I'll just vamp for a while. I think Captain America 2 is an awesome movie. It's got some of my favorite action scenes.
Only 3 minutes longer.
Oh man, but those 3 minutes were just such a bore. Oh man, it's actually probably shorter because runtimes include credits, and the credits for films have gotten infinitely longer these days. So
actually, yeah, so
it probably actually is shorter.
We should have mentioned that X2 once again does not have an end credit scene.
Yeah,
and
no Stan Lee cameo.
Unfortunately, we're gonna have to deal with some end credit scenes in the next few movies.
Yes, we are.
I would put, at this point, I would have Batman Begins, Dark Knight, and Winter Soldier above X2.
Okay. Oh, so you're leaving me to die on this hill alone. Okay.
Oh, yeah. That's why we're playing this game.
Oh, okay. All right. Steve Rogers, great character. Best Marvel character in my...
by far. I never would have guessed. I thought Captain America was the stupidest thing ever until I saw Winter Soldier.
Yeah, definitely. Like, if you ask me for a gut instinct reaction to Captain America, it is a negative one. It's like, oh, he's a Boy Scout, he's boring, he's, whatever, but he's the coolest character they have. I don't know, some of these things I can't really... You're asking me to pick between children at some point, because I'm that guy that goes...
Everyone has a favorite kid.
I go to every one of these movies.
Every parent has a favorite kid. I love them
all. Like, none of these are real criticisms, but I just personally prefer X-Men.
Only two more.
Okay. You're going to make me talk about Guardians of the Galaxy.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay. Right.
I think this is pretty easy, and just that the villain is less interesting.
Yeah, the villain is...
I think that kind of knocks it down a peg for X-Men.
It's getting by on being weird and being humorous and having a great
I think it's kind of like the Avengers in the sense that it's like the fact that they pulled this off is impressive, but give me the follow-up better be better.
And finally, and rewatchability as well. I can watch X-Men 2 over and over again. I watch Guardians back. This is the problem you have with a humor-driven film. It's the problem with Deadpool. Once you've heard all the jokes and you've laughed the first time, when you watch it again, it just isn't going to be as impactful. And I watch Guardians again, and I find myself skipping through large chunks of it. There are still awesome moments that I'll watch over and over again, but there are large scenes where I'll just hit the fast-forward button.
And finally, take us home, Civil War.
Eesh.
I actually don't think this is close. I think X2 is distinctly a better film.
Okay, so this is what I'm saying.
I like Civil War.
This is where we differ. That is the best Spider-Man has ever been on screen by far.
And given the appropriate amount of screen time too.
Yes, wow.
2 minutes. That's all we need from Spider-Man.
He's in it. He's in it a fair amount. He's awesome in this, and I'm a Spider-Man fan, so that's going to get bias from me. It's an awesome movie. I think the best thing I can say about X-Men, these first two X-Men movies, is they are very focused. They don't outstay their welcome. There is great character stuff. There's great action stuff in equal measure. A lot of these movies, there's either great action or great character stuff. Like Man of Steel is just action with nothing else going for it. I just have this bias towards X-Men. I will listen to an argument that Civil War is better, but I prefer X-Men.
Yeah.
Like my top movies, if you're going to make me include The Dark Knight and stuff in there, my top 5 in no real order would be X2, Civil War, Winter Soldier, and The Dark Knight.
Wow, number 4.
And I said in no order.
Oh, in no order. Okay.
And then either Batman Begins or Avengers 1, I guess.
Yeah, I mean all 4. I mean, I like all those, so can't complain.
Why did you make me do that?
So I think, as someone who's a big fan of X-Men in general, I think the idea that they've produced the best comic book movie is pretty bold of an idea. So I feel like it's worth challenging. Just not for like because I'm offended by the opinion, but more that I kind of want to put that. That's an opinion I would want to put to the test. Like
I think
really confronted with it side by side, is it better than all these other movies?
I think it beat a lot of them to the punch on a lot of things. I think these characters as a group work well. I think, like you said about Singer having a vision, I think there is that going for it.
Yeah,
and I will just always.
I loved something we didn't talk about is I loved how lived in this world feels. Like being able to pull Senator Kelly back. Not as a character because he's dead, but like pulling that actor and making the world feel more complete. You know, like Magneto really doesn't need to be in this movie, but you have Magneto in your quiver so you can pull him out and use him incredibly well, and add so much to the movie. And like that's what like Singer had established by this point, and that's why I didn't mind Cyclops mostly being dropped from this movie, because it's just like, okay, he takes a back seat here, but well, we're gonna put some other characters in the front seat.
Yeah.
Now next time, what are we gonna do? And it's a disaster.
Messed it up.
I hated everything about it, but I think the potential for what X-Men could become could not be clearer than X2, X-Men United. It's beautiful and tragic to go back and watch.
They have so many toys to play with in the X-Men universe. I think it's a large part of why Fox historically have not budged on giving it back, because
and there's been no financial reason to do so, because even the bad film. I mean,
they're making money, but
I think the Last Stand is the most popular opening weekend they had. Maybe Deadpool.
Yeah, I know.
But like you can actually. I mean, we'll get into it, but this will be a little teaser for what's to come. But like they were very deep. They were very invested in the Last Stand financially, promotionally, in ways they were not with the first two. Like just mostly anecdotal evidence, but just like there was poster series. It just felt like there was so much more promotion for the Last Stand.
They put the machine behind it.
Yeah, that's like, and again, I don't have actual evidence to back that up. It's anecdotal, but I'm sure that evidence exists somewhere, and someone far more dedicated than me can find it.
Yes, they probably can, but they probably won't.
No, because there's only 5 people listening.
Yeah, well, hello all of you.
And you can listen to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube, archive.org.
Yes. IntoTheRealWorld.com.
There you go.
Well, you've stolen my line. I was about to plug everything, but that's where you can find us. I'm on Twitter at Matt C. Waters. You are?
MC Thomas 216.
Repping that 216. Yes. Yeah, so thank you for listening.
Definitely not my birthday at all. It's definitely a zip code.
Oh, yeah. Okay. that makes sense. Thank you everyone for listening to this podcast about the greatest superhero movie ever made, and look forward to the next episode about one of the worst superhero movies ever made. Bye everybody.